leadership development firms, I realized that actually I wanted to work in a portfolio way. So over the past year or so, I have created my own business and have started working as an associate coach, both globally. So I specialize in working with global leaders, emerging leaders, senior leaders. And so I'm blending a couple of different ways of working. So not a traditional coach by working with one company, but I've also been an in-house coach and senior director. So I'm sort of seeing both sides of the fence. So I'm now in more of a discovery exploratory phase of building what I'm calling my own portfolio of coaching in different ways.
Yeah,
great. Thank you, Michael.
Yeah, I'll just pick up on that. I like the idea of portfolio because that's been my kind of eclectic approach to this. I work as an external coach. And so my background is having being trained in coaching. I went on to facilitate coaching training programs for the last 10 years. And I'm currently pursuing advanced studies in coaching supervision at Oxford Brookes University. I've worked with a lot of young leaders, and I do group coaching at McGill University as a way to extend both learning and education about the power and the applications of coaching, both in a group setting, team setting, and individuals. So I also volunteer at La Passerelle, which is a career transition center for Montrealers over the age of 40. So this is a wonderful time, I find, for a lot of the participants to actually take a step back and re-examine where they are along their career path and how group coaching can help facilitate that through the dynamics of experiential learning.
That's great, and thanks for introducing yourselves and telling us a little bit about where you are, where you've been, and maybe where you're going. If someone is interested in building an independent business of coaching, what's the best first step? Where do they start? Do they need a business strategy plan? What resources are available to help them? How do they get started?
I might sort of suggest, at least from my perspective, that I have taken a very serious business and strategic approach in starting my business. So I've learned from my nearly 30 years of working for various consulting firms, coaching firms, and niche specialist firms by actually looking at the external market. So one of the things that I did, Darren, to begin was do a little bit of a market research and an analysis. So I looked externally, while at the same time, I looked concurrently internally into what is it were my passions, purpose, and drives. So for me, my suggestion would be you look externally on what is out there and maybe where your fit is, or if you create something different, but also where is it coming from yourself.
Yeah, and I'll echo that in reverse order. I spent a lot of time pursuing my passion and starting with the idea of what is it that I want to offer and who is it that I want to be working with as I collaborate and partner with clients. Who are these clients? Who is my ideal client who would walk through the door or who I want to work with in a group setting? Participative, motivated, but also going through some sort of sense of angst or pain with a challenge, whether it be contextual or personal growth or professional growth for that matter in terms of career coaching. So these are all things that I've experienced over the course of my career. So this idea of being able to facilitate something that comes really from a genuine place in my heart and my soul makes that connection that much easier and more credible, I find.
I think that that's actually a really interesting point that you bring up about finding kind of who your ideal client is and knowing that you cannot be all things to all people and each person has sort of a niche. So how do you determine who your ideal client is, what sort of your unique selling proposition is, and how do you connect the two by taking on clients that are going to be both meaningful to you and them?
From my perspective, perspective, Darren, I have sort of looked at what are the things that really give me satisfaction, drive me, and who do I best connect with? So having worked in different kind of businesses in different countries, one of the things that helped me discover my own passion and USP, my unique selling sort of point area, is to see who is it that I most resonate with. And actually, one of the things I discovered in doing that is that I'm quite industry agnostic. However, because I myself have relocated many times internationally, I resonate very much with people who've moved from assignments or relocated or have been in significant transitions. And that's something that appeals to me. So in a way, that helps shape some of my focus. I wonder, Michael, if that was something similar for you in the way that you looked at your area of focus.
What came up for me is also the style of coaching. It was, the way I was trained was very eclectic in the sense that it folded in many different influences of that have affected coaching over the years. And so determining which type of coaching I was going to go into. And I noticed that one of the questions here is it better to start out as an executive coach and then move on to be a life coach? Mm-hmm. And it makes me smile because I remember the first ICF, the International Coach Federation conference I went to, I was going after different coaches saying, are you an executive coach or are you a life coach? And I remember an executive coach turning to me and saying, Michael, all executive coaching is life coaching, because ultimately you're coaching the person, not the title. If you're caught up doing that, then you're limiting yourself. So this idea of where you are on that spectrum of what's influencing you is part of that growth dynamic, if you will. I just want to share with you a model, Thomas Crane, there's a typo here I notice, but this idea of performance coaching, which kind of brings into a holistic practice of working with clients in a work setting. So what are the values and judgments, the attitude of the client, and how does that determine their behaviors, their actions, and the types of relationships that they build? Are you in an environment that nurtures who you're becoming? And what type of results do you want? And sometimes if it's hard to define those things, then it's hard to build the relationships, and your behavior gets put into question along with your values and beliefs. So you're going in a counterclockwise position. And oftentimes when working with executives or managers or even people just going through life changes, this type of model sometimes brings in a holistic approach, which I find helps kind of frame the type of coaching that I do.
Yeah, and, there's a question that's come up about are there perhaps going to be too many coaches? And I don't really think that there is such a thing as too many coaches, because there are so many people in this world and all of us could use coaching. But I guess that begs the question then, how do we stand out? And what are the differentiators? I know, an accredited coach is very different from a non-accredited coach. And there's so many factors that go in. I guess a lot of people can call themselves a coach, but what does that mean? And how do you stand out in the crowd?
Yeah, standing out from the crowd, Darren, I think is an incredibly interesting area to sort of delve into. And if I may just share with everybody that moving from Europe back to the US a few years ago, I noticed some different trends and patterns in the coaching industry. So actually being very aware of what's going on in the industry, and particularly maybe the types of organizations or individuals you want to work with. So staying very close, I guess, on the environment, the industry scanning, and what's the latest is very important. But also, just as if you were, I would say, looking for a new role inside an organization, part of it is for me about assessing what's important to you, what areas you want to work in. And Michael, you mentioned this earlier, what's your drivers and your passions? Because at the end of the day, we as human beings, we all thrive when we're doing something we're passionate about and that we enjoy, rather than being forced into a box that perhaps we don't like doing. So part of that, it's a self-discovery for ourselves as coaches, as well as discovering what we're going to be doing in terms of our own businesses.
Yeah, that's a great point. I love group coaching. I find team coaching a bit of a challenge because we're working with teams in corporate environments. It's just not my jam. I relate much more to people who come from different backgrounds but have a common interest. And I love the dynamics of groups versus teams. And that's just my style of coaching. So it really comes down to, as a coach, as you're developing a business, what's your reputation? How do you want to be known for? Is it your style of coaching? Is it the type of people that you are attracting? Are they solopreneurs? Are they busy executives? Are they people going through career change, like I like to work with? All those sorts of factors come into play. It's really sitting down and really kind of saying, who are the people I want to attract in my life that would make this vocation so much easier?
I think you raise a great point there, Michael, which is a coach could be everything to everybody, shall we say. However, if you look at what's important to you and the kinds of people you want to work with, that can help you carve out your niche. So, for example, recently I've worked with a business partner to set up a global leadership psychology and coaching firm, and we've addressed our own 4 to 5 niche areas based on our mutual interests and where we want to go to market. I find when I have conversations with other coaches that sometimes they're not clear as to where they want to be and what they want to do. And I'm curious, Ram, within your business and the programs that you offer, whether there's a pattern more of people being more open-minded in general as they come into a coaching program and a certification program, or are they being much more specific and targeted?
A couple of things. Before I answer that question, Nikki, let me go back to an earlier question that was asked in terms of what kind of a client would you like? I think that was Darren's question, if I remember right. Both of you answered in terms of your personal preferences. Perhaps because of my age, because of my experiences, whatever. I'm very, very Rogerian in that approach. It's client-centric in a sense. It doesn't matter who the client is. To me, it's like the Tom Hanks statement, clients are like a box of chocolates. You don't know what you're going to get anyway. So in a true sense, because at that point in time, there's also something else which comes up very naturally, which is about going, not knowing, which is really what coaching is all about. If you know what to expect, and if you know what's going to happen, first of all, I don't think there is any joy in coaching. And secondly, then the coach's own judgment agenda takes over. This is my personal belief. So to answer Darren's question first in terms of that, and then there have also been a couple of questions about someone saying that I have self-trained and I earn so much, good coach, great coach, and all that stuff. Essentially, anyone can call himself or herself a coach. I don't think there is any licensing required, so it can be done. The trouble is, most people who venture into coaching, which then, Nikki, from there I'll come to your question. Most people who go into coaching without any kind of formal training are people who believe that they have a large amount of corporate experience. They have very good, what they term as coaching experience, which is really mentoring experience, which is seriously different. Mentoring experience is about solutioning, it's about offering advice, it's based on your experience and expertise, whereas coaching is all about exploration. And both of you have dealt with executives, and so the biggest problem when you work with executives is to get them to reflect, get them to move beyond what they already know. Otto Scharmer calls it beautifully the 4 levels of listening, where the first level is only listen to what you know already, and the other 3 levels are going beyond that. So I think any coach training, a good coach training, obviously, would provide far more inputs than just the coaching framework. It trains you into listening, it trains you into being present, it trains you into being aware, in addition, create awareness in other people. So I think it's a tremendous value in joining a good quality accreditation program. And my own experience is that if you are really good, if you know what you're doing, and if you're capable of using your Rolodex or whatever digital media today, your return on investment could be less than a year. So it all depends how much effort. I have known people who say, oh, you know, I've had so many years of corporate experience. Why do I need another label? You don't need a label, but you need a framework. And often people do not understand the difference between the two. You can't be an architect without professional training. You can't be a doctor without professional training, but everybody thinks that they can be a coach without any professional training. And I find it a little strange and ironic. So coming back to, and one of the words that Michael used is absolutely something that I resonate with. Coaching is not a profession to me, it's a vocation. It's one of the noblest vocations that is possible. So there is a lot more to it than merely earning money, sort of delivering a certain result to a client. It's about transformation. It's about your own inner transformation that continuously going on. So coming back to who are the people who are coming to coach training, we generally at Coacharya, we tell people up front, and this was a distinction that Michael made extremely well. All executive coaches are life coaches. However, all life coaches are not executive coaches. So the problem usually happens is when, especially in a country like India, I don't know whether America is very different, I don't think so. There are enough number of grandparents, granduncles, aunts, and friends and relatives who can provide you a lot of that kind of advice. And so the life coaching is not necessarily for anyone really a career option. It could be a good vocational option if you decide that it's fine, I'm going to do it pretty much pro bono or without charging too much. Whereas if you really want to do the kind of work I love doing, that you get paid for what you think you are worth, at the same time, I have the option to work with people without charging them any money as well. Then I personally believe, I may be completely be wrong, that executive coaching is probably a better way because corporates have the capability to pay you. And so coming back to specifically, we normally tell people that though we are not, that we are pretty much an executive coach training. And of course, whatever we train people for makes them fit for life coaching. You can call it wellness coaching. You can call it any coaching that you want. There's really no difference. The basis is the same. And the kind of, at least in India, in Asia, generally perhaps, the clientele that we attract, I would say about 30 to 40% are people who are already in the human resources field in one way or another. They are either who have been HR people, L&D people who either have quit and then they want to add on additional knowledge and they become coaches, or they are in the business, they would like to learn and be internal coaches. I would like to see far more line managers come into this profession. And that is one thing that we are doing, trying to promote this. And the other is that, at least in India, though worldwide, women constitute a higher percentage of coaches. In India, at this point in time, our own experience is about 35%. 65% are men. So that is another thing which I personally believe, and many men will take exception to that women make better coaches. And I'm willing to stake my reputation on that. They are much better listeners, and men are not. They are far less solution focused than men are. So for these factors, I would like to see more women, and I've been trying to persuade Magda and Darren to become coaches, but they haven't decided as yet. But yeah, let me stop there. That's it.
Great. I think this is a good opportunity, Magda, for you to put up the poll results from the poll that you showed earlier. So it looks like most of the people joining us either don't yet have a coaching business, which is great that you're here, or are solo practitioners. It looks like some people are partnering with others, some people are part of a group, and some people are internal coaches. So since we have a fairly large percentage of people who are not yet coaches, congratulations on being here. This is the first step. Let's talk about the nitty-gritty a little bit. What are the first steps to building a practice, to building a business? Let's talk about things like pricing. How do you price yourself so that you're compensated for the value that you provide, but also knowing that many individual coaching clients are in career transitions, life transitions, et cetera, may not be able to afford your full rate. So how do you then work with people to get the value that you can provide, but also that you're receiving proper compensation? So I'd love to talk a little bit about the nitty gritty that comes along with building a coaching practice.
I think the question, Darren, about the value proposition is very important when you create your own coaching business, or if you're looking to be, for example, an associate and a contractor. So speaking from my experience, what I did some research on, I almost did due diligence in terms of what were the different industry rates, and looked at the different experience to credentials value proposition. And certainly one of the things I saw in the last year or two, at least here in the US and in Europe, was the growing need for businesses to see credentialed coaches through the ICF, and therefore the correlation of the value proposition was very much tied to that, whereas perhaps some years before it wasn't. But I do think it's an interesting space to be in once you move into individual coaching. It can be how long is a piece of string in terms of people's rates. And I found some people are willing to share rates and some people aren't, but in a way you need to figure out what it is you believe your value proposition is. And I'd be interested to hear, Michael, how you see that from your side of the business.
Yes, and to Ram's point too, in terms of accreditation, that's so important here in Canada. For instance, if I'm to work with a corporation or the government here, I would have to have a minimum PCC, Professional Certified Coach, accreditation by the ICF. And the industry trend is towards that. You have to have that minimum number of hours and ongoing continuous professional development. It's so important. You know, I've been studying, I'm up to 33 different coaching approaches at this point. So a lot of times coaches get trained in one specific area like NLP, and that becomes a way of doing coaching. So they're going to attract those clients and charge whatever NLP coaches in that market are charging. I find generally, anecdotally, I find ACC coaches tend to charge a little less than PCC coaches. And of course, MCC coaches tend to work with larger organizations and areas like that. So the rates are commensurate with their degree of expertise in terms of their ability to coach in various platforms and means. That being said, it's also market driven. I find that if it's a recession or if the economy's good, depends on if you're East Coast, West Coast here in North America, where the businesses are located, etc. These are all drivers. But one thing you should never do is underestimate the value that you give as a coach. Too often I see coaches underprice themselves. And what happens then, I find, is that you get clients who are kind of like, meh, I'm kind of in, I'm kind of out. On the other hand, I've worked with an MCC coach who was charging $3,500, and she only got really top level executives. And at that point, they were driving what they wanted from the coaching session. So she said, I'm attracting the wrong clients. So she went down to her usual rate of $250 an hour, and she got the mid-level managers that she wanted to work with, because these are the people who are more participative as opposed to demanding on her. So you really have to find that level of comfort where you value yourself and the service you're offering. And I really encourage you not to undervalue your price point.
That's a great point, Michael. And I do have a question following up from that. You talk about market rate, market pricing. Are there any resources out there that people can turn to in different markets to understand what that market rate is, so that they are either not overpricing themselves, but also not leaving money on the table either?
There's been many studies done on this, and certainly you can check out the International Coach Federation website. They have many reports on this. So ICF, which is coachfederation.org. There's also the European Mentoring, Coaching and Counseling Association, and they also have thorough reports on that. Now, the rates in Europe are commiserately higher than they are here in North America. And in my case, they are higher in the United States than they are in Canada. by a good 30 to 40%.
And I would also add and build on that, that not only does the ICF do a survey, I think there was one done just over a year ago about rates, I have also found some local coaching professional networking groups to be a great resource to ask questions. And people are often willing to share more in a professional small setting. And then there are some coaching and consulting firms who sometimes write articles about the kinds of programmatic coaching, which you can glean some further information on. But obviously, I think to your point, Michael, it can vary very much. And part of it, Darren, is about finding that sweet spot for yourself. Where are you based on your value proposition, the kind of niche area you're coaching in, and where is it you want to work? And I can personally share that I have different rates because I do some programmatic coaching, which is a different rate than if I would charge individually. And then potentially if I have a 1-year contract, that rate could be different than if I'm signed up for, say, 3 months of coaching.
Absolutely. And some of the best advice that you've given me, Nicky, as a coach, so Nicky has been coaching me for the past year, is to look to LinkedIn and Facebook groups in the industry in which I work. And that has been immensely beneficial and helpful. What are some other resources that you look to build your practice, to learn about your craft, to really hone your skills, and to network?
In my case, I have two initiatives along those lines. One of them is to do pro bono group coaching for people going through career transition. So there's an employment agency. There's many here in Montreal, of course, but I work with one in particular. So by doing that, by doing a group coaching workshop for 2 hours on where they're going next in their career, allows them to see how I am as a coach, my approach to where we're going and where they're going as in their career. And the other one is through the university, starting with continuing education. I do life transitions. I said, I'm very interested in life transitions and how we go through different phases of our life and the stages of psychosocial development. And so the things that interest me, I'm like, well, why don't I share that with a group and make it affordable? So they get a 5-part series for $250. It's only $50 a session for them. So that's eminently affordable for a 2-hour session at this continuing education program at the university. So it's kind of a lost leader, if you will, in terms of business development. But what it does is it keeps my name out there. And I do occasionally pick up at least 1, if not 2 clients after these types of presentations.
And as a follow-up to that too, I'd like to ask, and then Nicky, I'd love for you to kind of explain as well your best and favorite resources. But how about advertising? How about social media? Are those tools that either of you are using to gain new clients? And Nicky, actually, I'd love to have you answer that one first, because I know that you're also working with a lot of individual clients as well. So how useful are those tools to you?
Sure. So I definitely have increased, shall we say, my social media presence over the last year. One of the things that myself, and I'm in an alliance of similar leadership psychologist coaches, is looking at ways that we can post interesting articles on LinkedIn and share mutual comments and support. So we pick different topics each month on things. So for example, in December, we posted about women in leaders. In the last month, I've been posting a lot about leadership around moving in global roles, relocating, how does that change your leadership style? So that can also be one avenue for people to consider. And besides also sort of the LinkedIn, Facebook, and ICF groups, I would encourage coaches to look at other business groups and not just stay within the coaching parameters, but market with other people. So for example, I'm fairly new to the area. I live in Pennsylvania, and I've joined a board of a national park. And as a result, I'm meeting a lot of business leaders and people who were in business and sort of connecting in that way. So that's one avenue that people can start to think about to get known in perhaps the area that they want to do more work in.
Great. Michael, any thoughts on that as well?
Yeah, by my growing reputation as being a group coach, I was called upon at at a last minute contract to facilitate something here for our neighborhood association. They were doing a retreat, and they needed some group/team coaching on where they were going in the next year. And they'd heard good things about me, and could I put something together for them? So I sat down and basically, like with any client, what are your needs? So what are your objectives? What's an ideal outcome? And formulated something for them. So it was a great way to give back to the community. And it was because of my group coaching experience that afforded me that opportunity. So once you put yourself out there, and whether you start pro bono or doing these things for the community, the idea is to keep your name and your skills ever evolving.
Mm. And I have two other quick thoughts here as well, which is, one, if you ever get an opportunity to be a facilitator or a speaker, or to add some, specialist advice to a local business networking group, a chapter group, that's one way for you to get known. And also, one thing I have discovered is whenever you're working with clients, either during or after, to ask for some kind of testimonial. And obviously with their permission, to be able to use that, whether you use it in your website. More and more I find clients want some kind of testimonial or context from similar people you may have coached. And that's something that is really good. And it also helps you as a coach get some feedback along the way.
Great. Ram, I'd love to hear your perspective as well.
Yeah. Darren, before we go into many of the other aspects like fees and all that, I'll briefly mention that. I think the most important advice that I would give any budding coach, which is what, at least when I used to teach or train people, I used to tell them, that if they are putting up a shingle, make sure that you incorporate as an entity, as a company, especially in North America and Western countries, perhaps not so in Asian countries, because the risks and the liabilities are far too high. You need to, first of all, you have to realize that you're starting up a business, you're not doing some kind of a informal kind of work, and it's extremely important, and which in many cases, when you are serious coach being considered for an executive assignment, they're going to ask you, do you have insurance? And I think it's very important, and they're not very expensive. ICF has partner companies. There are others. It costs, I don't remember now exactly how much, maybe $100, $200 a year, something of that sort, for a couple of $1 million. So it's something very simple. So this is something I would seriously advise you. And before you start, you need to be very clear on a kind of target audience that you want to address. I did say earlier, you take what comes up there, a box of chocolates, but you have to be at a particular level to be able to do that. But when you start your business, you need to be very clear. What is a space that you're going to be in, and which will also define in some ways the kind of remuneration that you're likely to get. And then based on that, far more importantly, how do you promote yourself? Whether it is through the social media, LinkedIn and others, or through your network, or credibility and visibility enhancement through speeches and blogs and all this kind of stuff. It's much better that you select some kind of, it can be a broad niche, but it needs to be something which is specific in terms of, and Darren earlier asked about what is your value differential, unique selling proposition, and so on and so forth. So these are far more important to my mind before we start talking about pricing, because it's very much of your pricing is going to depend upon what is the value that is being perceived by the client about you, not about the price tag that I put on my, like a dog tag, saying that I would charge these many dollars an hour. How does it make a difference? It really, the guy doesn't see the value, he won't. And if, for example, if you go to the ICF website, they also, if you list there as a coach, they would send you from time to time. Typically, you would find it's about $50 to $100 an hour. Whether you want to do that kind of work, it's up to you. Initially, when you don't have any work, maybe it's worthwhile doing that. And probably today, for example, in Asia, I find that the coaching fees are probably at a certain level when you establish a reputation, if you're a PCC coach, which from a business perspective, you don't need to really go to an MCC coach. Most people are, like Michael said, PCC is really the kind of a bar that you need to cross. Could be anywhere from about $300 to $600 in that range. per session. Like, for example, I always do at least 90-minute sessions. I don't do 60-minute sessions. So in a calculation rate, it might be cheaper. Like Nicky said, if you have multiple sessions, if you have multiple clients, it could be lower. But these are things that you can aspire to do. But I would say that that is secondary. One of the things that helped me when I did my coach training, and I did at a pretty late age, even though that I had been a CEO, group CEO, all kinds of stuff, I had to really start from the start because from scratch, as it were, because I came back to India after several decades outside India. Nobody really knew me. So I decided that I would like to find out what people in the profession need. So I joined an HR organization. In India, it is called NHRD, very reputed HR organization, National Human Resources Network. And that is really where I got to meet many people who are professionals who gave me advice, as not so much advice in terms of where I should go for coaching, but I learned a lot about what the pain points of the organizations are. And it is with that. And I was interested in training, so I started as a trainer. They constituted my first batch, never looked back. And along with that, there were many other coaching assignments which came up. So you need to do it in a progressive manner. There were a couple of questions out there, Varun, how do I get over the inhibition of asking for money? It's a limiting belief. So if you believe that you are worth it, this is a profession like anything else. And like what I do, I have no inhibitions about stating this is what I want, which might be much higher than what the market rate may be. But at the same time, I have the discretion to go and do whatever work I want free of cost to many other people. But there's an underlying statement there is for many people, especially for coaches who think about it as a vocation, who think about it as a service, they find it very difficult to promote themselves. I wouldn't call that asking for money, but promoting yourself becomes very difficult for many people. So my suggestion I had the same problem at one point in time. So what I did was, and which may work for you, I decided to promote the profession, not just me. So I became an evangelist for professional coaching. I tried to set up a local organization, work with people saying that, you know, this is the advantage of being credentialed, this is the advantage of using a framework, rather than just calling yourself a coach. And you need to do that in order to be credentialed and so on. This is what you can do. And so if you're looking for a credentialed coach, I'm one of the people who are available. And when I built up a network today, for example, mostly I promote people who work with me, who have been trained by us. So rather than putting myself out there, because I have enough work, I don't need more work. So the whole idea is to promote the profession first and the network next. And then finally, if there's an absolute essential need for me to come in, I would come in. So there are many ways in which you can overcome this inhibition. But today it is easier because your visiting card is no longer a formal visiting card that you have to hand over with a handshake, but it's the social media. It's a LinkedIn. It could be something else. And so you're much more anonymous. So the simple technique, I keep telling people, and some of our people who we've trained have really been very, very successful, is to keep experimenting with the LinkedIn profile till they find in that particular description, they come up in the top 10. For instance, if you want to be sought after in, let's say, Chicago as an executive coach in a particular industry, if you like. So you keep putting your tagline and then check for yourself, executive coach in Chicago in the health industry or whatever. Does your name come up in the top 3 or top 5? And that's as a simple rule of thumb that works extremely well as a quick test. So there are multiple ways of how you do this. It's just being street smart. So if you decide that you want to be a coach, you're also deciding in parallel that you are being an entrepreneur. So you need to acquire the skills of both being a coach and an entrepreneur. I'm not saying it's easy. The mindsets are slightly different. But the point is you can be. I'll leave it at that.
Yeah, I'd just like to build on that, Ram, because it's really important. I found this out the hard way too. You know, like you said, you put out a shingle and you hope that clients will just show up or give you a call or get on your website and book you. oftentimes that's just not the case. And I see a few questions here about how struggling to get their first few clients. It really comes down to, for me, two critical things. One is relationships, building relationships, building connections. And the best way to do that is to contribute. We no longer live in an era of push where you're kind of advertising and promoting the heck and trying to get that sort of thing. It's really about pull at this point. What are you doing that's attracting the people that you want into your life? And oftentimes you can do that by contributing. So contributing by doing pro bono group sessions, information sessions, or even a blog or an article. I'm sharing articles with people all the time. And sometimes people say, you know what? That's great. LinkedIn is all about relationship building. It's not just about posting your CV. You have to be involved, liking and commenting on people in a way that says, I always make sure to try and contribute something else to that. I'll say, you know what? I saw this article. I thought you might be interested in it. Keeps them top of mind and also shows that you're still very much interested in maintaining a relationship. And oftentimes I find the bulk of my clients come from word of mouth. So-and-so recommended you. So-and-so said you were great at this, and I'm wondering if you could work with, this is how it goes. So it's about relationship building and maintaining. So certainly that's, and how to contribute to everybody.
I would also agree with that, Michael, in terms of being an entrepreneur is quite exciting, but it can also be quite scary if you're starting up a business. And a couple of lessons that came to my mind, I know, Darren, I've shared a few of these with you, which is, remember, you're not alone. So in a way, think about who can you create in your alliance, your network. And for me, for example, I've got a whole new alliance of coaches on the East Coast as well as global. However, I also seek out people who are great business people. So I know someone who's great at finance. I know somebody who's great at business development. And actually, I've figured out a way of running a business where I often barter for services. So actually, there's a bartering system. But I've also recognized if I'm going to be out there building those relationships and building a coaching business, the mechanics of running a business are things which perhaps I can outsource. So it's also about figuring out how much time you work in your business as well as on your business. And I would also agree that the pro bono, particularly here in the US, is very much favored. I have global leadership clients who ask me, who are the other kinds of people you work with? And I'm a mentor to a high school student and do things with her school program. And then I volunteer at a park board and talk to a lot of business leaders. Those are things which often when I'm working with leaders, they want to know, to your point, Michael, where else are you contributing your expertise, your knowledge to the community? And that is becoming much more important, I find.
Absolutely. And it sounds like from everything that you've all said, this is not an easy path. This is a fulfilling path, but not an easy path. And I'm sure no matter where you are in your journey to make a business of coaching, mistakes have been made. So what are some of those mistakes that maybe you have made so that we can talk about those so that maybe others don't make those mistakes, that you've learned from them and grown from them? Michael, you have a big grin on your face, so I'll let you take this one.
In the beginning, I was so excited. I wanted to make sure I had all my business cards, my website up and running, and flyers, and I would go out, and I was keen to write a book, and I was like spending so much time on this and getting so caught up in it. I felt myself being drawn into a world that wasn't necessarily me. And I think then people started to see me a bit as pitching coaching as opposed to just exuding coaching. And at a given point, I just said, you know what, I'm putting that away, and I'm just going to be who I am in a way that's congruent with my values and my beliefs. And if I attract those people into my life, people come up to me and go, wow, I'm so glad you explained, for instance, I'm a huge introvert. And people are confused by that when I'm speaking in front of 400 people, let's say, in a university hall. And they're like, how can you do that? And I said, well, introversion is really about energy. It's not about just being one-on-one. And when they start to relate to me and what I offer in terms of my way of being and the way I coach, and I'll do demos. Oh, I'm not afraid to do a demo in front of hundreds of people. I'll sit down and say, let's do it. Let's bring it on. And I'll talk out, if it's a struggle for me, I'll say this is what comes up in coaching, and this is something we can all learn from. And that's, for me, the key aspect here. It's about learning. Learning for me, coaching for me is really about learning, because as a coach or as a client, as a collaboration, it's a learning process. So for those of you who think you're natural coaches, believe me, I've spent over a decade studying this. I'm constantly learning. I'm constantly learning about new things about coaching, how to deal with ethical dilemmas, dealing with a client I'm working with whose boss has just told me they're about to be fired. Do I bring that into the coaching conversation? What are the ethics on that? And that's where having peer group discussions like Nicky was talking about. I go to regular ICF chapter meetings here in Montreal. We have a coaches dinner exchange where we talk about these issues that come up, and we talk about pricing, what the future of coaching is, the use of artificial intelligence, these all sorts of things that are impacting the industry. How does that help insulate us from these growth opportunities and learning opportunities as a coach?
I completely agree with you, Michael, that a number of those things resonated for me. One of the things, not necessarily a mistake I made, but you can get so easily sucked into building a business that you forget you need to be actually out there connecting and creating business conversations wherever you want to be doing the kinds of work you're doing. And in fact, I realize that there's a couple of useful strategies people, when they're starting up as an independent or in a small business, which is there's many alliances and networks that you can connect with both virtually or in person. In fact, this morning I was on with our local ICF chapter, and we brought up the topics of neuropsychology and neurochemistry and how the brain works. And we were just literally talking about that in the context of coaching. So we bring topics of interest. And another group that I'm part of, an executive coaching group, we bring any particular issues in a private and confidential manner to sort of share with other coaches for their advice. So it's a group of seasoned to quite new coaches. So that idea of don't go it alone, but look at where can you tap into other resources, other supports, and staying abreast of your own learning and development, I would say, is one of the most critical things you can do as a coach, because we're encouraging our clients to explore, discover, try new things. And I believe that clients want to see that in their coach as well.
Yeah, and that's why mentor coaching and now coaching supervision is so important going forward. It's been around in Europe for a long time. It's certainly gaining strength and popularity here in North America. I'm talking specifically now about coaching supervision. So the idea, which further adds credibility to the coaching profession and vocation, if you will, because as coaches, we all need to check in every once in a while to see if, and admittedly, you know, I'll put it out there, as a coach, after I finished the training, I thought, wow, I'm great. I got great marks in my training. I'm out there and I'm doing it. And I spent 2 years without a mentor coach. And I thought I was going fine. And then I found myself drifting into advising, consulting, and I wasn't satisfied. Clients were dropping off after the 4th session. I was like, what am I doing wrong here? I so desperately want to be of service to them. And then I checked in with a mentor coach and then later with a coaching supervisor, and I realized, wow, I'd really been drifting. And what were some of the challenges coming up for me that I wasn't seeing? I was so concerned about keeping the client happy that I was getting away from coaching. I was getting into advising and saying, okay, well, let's talk about this third person that's not in the room. And you get kind of caught up in that sort of thing. So this is why ongoing training and working with a mentor or supervisor is so critical and so important for you to grow as a coach.
Well, and it sounds a lot like you're saying that coaches also need coaches. And Nicky, you said this, you don't have to go it alone. We all need to practice what we preach as well, and coaches need coaches. Ram, I think, you raised your hand there.
Yeah. It's not so much, I'm lucky that probably I didn't make that many mistakes, but I could have very easily made those mistakes, and there are some regrets in terms of what I could have done differently. One of the things Michael already alluded to it, In terms of continuous learning, I'm like Michael, a lifelong learner. And one of the things early in the game that I realized was coaching was not about the competencies, the 11 competencies of ICF or the 8 competencies of EMCC or 6 competencies of CCE. It's much more than that. There's a tremendous lot, and people, trainers especially, I think do a lot of disservice by limiting themselves to training people just that and not much more. So there's a whole huge world of OD interventions, organizational development interventions that can be loosely defined. And there are many things like neuro-linguistic programming, positive psychology, appreciative inquiry, transaction analysis. I can go on and on. Nicky, I think, referred to biology, neurophysiology, and stuff like that. So many of those. And I think a good coach has to have, if not, certainly it's impossible to have mastery of each one of them. Though I train myself as a master practitioner with Bandler and NLP and several other stuff, supervision as a formal course, a mentor as a formal course. But at least you need to have a good grounding on what they are, especially the psychological moorings of coaching, because at the end of the day, coaching is a psychological process. You don't have to be a psychologist, you don't have to be a psychiatrist, but you need to have an understanding of what, at least a thorough understanding of what Jungian psychology is. And then parallel to it, many of the other stuff that you need to do. If you don't, you are going to be just an average coach, one of those kind of many who peddle the craft, but you're never going to be a great coach. And in addition, I would invite those of you who are interested, then get into like what I did. And there are many others who are following that in terms of the spiritual aspect, which today may be called by many names. Sir John Whitmore was the one who started it, transpersonal coaching. Now we have people like Fiona Adamson and others who don't call themselves as spiritual coaches, but they are transpersonal coaches whose entire approach transcends the normal pattern of coaching. So these are things we can all work with, go beyond what those competencies are as defined, multiple interventions, continuous learning, and so on. And for me, somebody asked a question, millennials. More and more, it was something that I wanted to do for a long time. Today I try and work as much as I can with millennials, and we are trying to see how best to do that. There are two sets of millennials, highly successful people, and I call them confused generation because they have become very highly successful, but they are completely dissatisfied with whatever they are doing, but they don't know what is going to satisfy them. So there's a whole vicious cycle that is going on there. And they are pretty ripe in terms of any transformative changes that you can make. And they're also, in many cases, very successful. They have the money as well to pay. But there are also a lot of other people out there who are confused and perhaps not as successful and therefore not as much money. So is there some way, and Michael referred to group coaching. So I do a lot of work with group coaching, also as team coaching, systemic coaching. These are systemic coaching today, similar to supervision, all these kind of stuff. Many corporates are today working on programs where they would like to train their managers as coaches, moving them from mentor managers to coach leaders, as it were. So coaches have a tremendous golden opportunity out here. You don't have to restrict yourself to just being, very many people tell me, no, I don't like coaching groups. I don't like coaching teams. Yes, it's a little more difficult. There's a bit of an art to it, but it's something that can be learned. In fact, we run weekly free webinars in terms of helping people to understand what is team coaching, what is supervision, and many of the frontiers of what coaching is moving into. Please take advantage of that. And that is what I would really seek you to do. Thanks.
Great, thank you so much. And as we near the end of our webinar, I kind of just wanted to summarize. So it sounds like this is hard work. Keep up the good work. You're not alone. To start a business, you want to start with the basics. Figure out the structure of your business, figure out pricing, et cetera. But even more importantly than that, rising above the nitty-gritty of it, understanding what your niche is, who you want to work with, kind of what your unique selling proposition and personal brand is, and then go out and network yourself with a a plethora of resources that are out there, everything from Chamber of Commerce to WeWork, LinkedIn, Instagram even. There are so many ways to market yourself. But I think what we've heard today is that what's so important is authenticity and connection. Your intention determines your outcome. So if your intention is to help people grow and move through transitions, difficult periods or times in their life, or even just to grow personally and professionally, if that is your intention, then you will succeed. But don't be afraid to ask for what you know what your value is, to make sure that you set your pricing accordingly, to make sure that you're working with clients, that it is a mutual fit for you. But connecting with other human beings at every stage of this game, I think, is incredibly crucial. We thank you guys so much for participating with us from all over the world, for asking really wonderful questions. If you want to connect with any of our panelists today, please reach out to Magda at Coacharya.com. She'll be happy to connect you with anyone on the panel today, anyone who has spoken. And just so you know, CCEUs will be emailed automatically. There is no need to submit a claim. And thank you all so very much. This has been really a wonderful discussion.
Yeah, great questions. Thanks very much.
Thanks to everybody.
All the best.
Thank you.